Why are Chelsea still signing so many young players? Young Leny Yoro is moving to Manchester United. Amadou Onana is apparently moving to Aston Villa from Everton. Young Liam Delap moving from Manchester City to Ipswich. There's a theme here, don't know if you've noticed. And who should buy Nico Williams? He's young! Oh, and I'm here with Jon Mackenzie and JJ Bull. Let's begin with Chelsea, JJ, because Chelsea, they're still signing many young players. I mean, I was kind of surprised. There's a long list of players. Many of the names I do not recognise. Talk to me about some of these names.
Well, as you observe from this squad list, they clearly need to buy some more. So to add to this, otherwise they have to. It's like a Pokemon. You have to collect them all, and then you win the game. Yeah, that's what Chelsea are trying to do. But there is strategy to it, and most of it is because Chelsea is not. This sounds harsh. It's not really a football club. It's being dealt with as a business, right. An investment thing you can make money out of. And one of the things you can make money out of is players, especially if you consider them as assets. So what they're doing is buying young players that might not necessarily be first teamers, but they have the potential to get into the first team eventually, or they retain value and they can be sold on as a profit. And we can go through some of the players they've signed. They can show you exactly what they're doing. So they've already made money that they can balance their books with this season by selling Ian Matson, Lewis Hall, and Omari Hutchinson. So there's money to play with. They also sold some hotels. But the players they've bought are young, high potential. So, for example, they bought a player called Omari Kellyman from Aston Villa for about £18 million roughly. And he is an attacking midfielder / striker. I think he'll probably end up as a striker. He's very tall, he's like 6'2", 6'3". Stands out in the youth level because tall players tend to, because physical attributes really help when you're young. But seems like a decent player. However, he's not really a first teamer yet. I think he's played 2 sub-appearances for Villa. He is clearly a high-level potential player that they might grow into. But more, really, he's a way to get around PSR, because Aston Villa had to sell players to meet demands at the end of June, and Chelsea have bought him in because of that. So they might make profit in a couple of years. Okay. They'll either sell him for the same amount if he keeps going on his development path, or he might be worth more and become a first teamer. You never know. Another player they signed is Renato Vega, who some people like, some people aren't sure about. He's he can play at left back or defensive midfield or in midfield. He's very versatile, loves a long pass forward, captained Portugal under 20s. It's quite decent, but you can see the potential there. He's captain of a youth team international level. That's really good. High potential, sell on, or maybe a first teamer. You don't know. They've got quite a lot of players. He's also tall. They're signing lots of big players. That obviously helps if you have tall players. It's not a theme, but what a lot of teams are doing now, because it turns out physical attributes are very important in sport. Then they've signed a player, Marc Guéhi, they signed from Barcelona. It's a different kind of thing. Sure, he's kind of tall, like 6'1", depending on where you read heights, because heights are listed differently everywhere. But he was available for about €6 million, because in Spain you have to have release clauses, and Barcelona couldn't get rid of his €6 million release clause. So you sign him, he's instantly now probably worth about £50 million. Right. So that especially when you convert it from euros. So like he's instantly, they've made money on him, and if he becomes a first teamer, that's great, or they can ship him out on loan to develop and develop that way. And they have Strasbourg as part of the Blue Co world. Right. So they bought Strasbourg, they can put players there, they can control their development, they can get better, they've got control of how these players can turn into the level they should do. Another player they've signed is Aaron Anselmino, who is an Argentinian defender. He's very aggressive. When he goes into a tackle, he takes both you, the ball, your dog, and your family all in one. He's very aggressive. Looks like quite a decent player, but he's only played really at Boca Juniors reserve level. He's got a few games for the first team, but again, that's a high potential signing. You get them in now for a lower amount of money, so they develop, and then they're worth far more, either as a first teamer, or you can sell them. That's what they've done. That's what they've signed this summer so far. Last summer, they signed even more players. Right. As you can see, this is why the list is so big.
They keep doing it, JJ.
They do.
Tell me more.
Oh, do we tell you who they are so you know what they've done? David Washington, Brazilian striker, quite highly thought of in Brazil. Very young, tall, can run with the ball. He's semi-decent, right? But he got loaned to Strasbourg. And you've got Angelo, who's a left-footed winger. I think he was the youngest player in the history of the Brazilian National Championship. He made his debut, aged just 15 and 308 days. Yeah. That's very impressive.
I'm thinking of John David Washington, the actor from Tenet, aren't I?
Yes, it's the same one.
It's the same player.
Yeah, that's right. Diego Moreira, Belgian winger.
He's a really good actor.
Very talented.
He method acts being really good at football.
Incredible. Sorry, carry on.
That's all right. Of course, Romeo Lavia, they signed him last season, injured, didn't really get in the team, but decent player. Leslie Ugochukwu played 15 games for Chelsea last season. Again, potentially could become a really good player.
Yeah.
I think he's all right just now. So it's quite clear what Chelsea are trying to do. They're trying to build this empire that is self-sustainable and makes money, because obviously they spent a lot of money and that is going to be unsustainable going forward.
Yeah.
So they think they're balancing the books now, and this is very risky. But as Begdad Eghbali has said, we thought Chelsea was a beachhead, so where they can launch all their attacks from in their business world. So it's a beachhead to do multi-clubs. They've already bought Strasbourg, that's what they've got. They started with Chelsea. We think, frankly, winning, which they haven't been able to do that well, they ended the season okay. A good product on the pitch and commercial success go hand in hand.
I wonder what they think when they're not being frank, you know?
Well, absolutely. You have to have a good product to generate the sponsors and for the content to work. You've got to win. Winning on the field, you have to do that to have commercial success. So the whole thing is built around assets that you bring in, you can turn into more valuable assets. You get a good return on investment, to put on my business hat, but also the entire of the company raises in value. You can buy more players and it becomes this model. They're basically trying to do what Brighton are doing, but with far more money and with lots of supercharged capital put into it immediately.
Yeah. So I mean, there's some risk involved here, isn't there?
Quite a lot, yes.
Yeah. Well, I guess the thing about these player assets, unlike perhaps a little bit more stability elsewhere where one might invest, players, they can break legs or they can.
Or hearts.
That's
right.
Yeah.
Like Chelsea fans. But like the players, their future, you can sign those players to this Chelsea vision because there's a chance they get to play in the Premier League. They'll get I'd imagine a good sign-on fee and good wages. But they also get shown like this is your development pathway. You can definitely play at Strasbourg, where like Ligue 1 is a good league for players to develop in, so you've got that going on, but also Chelsea can track it. They've got a loan manager who'll just look at every single player, give them their individual pathway, and then they can see.
I was going to ask on that, like, is there an outstanding prospect in here with these young players?
Their outstanding prospect isn't there. They've signed him, but he's not going to join till he's 18 because of Brazilian. I think it's Brazilian laws, isn't it? You can't move until you're 18. But
Brazilian laws.
I think it's Brazilian
Sick
laws.
of those Brazilian laws.
I might be wrong with that, but there's a guy called Estevão Willian who is the next big thing. He's thought of as like the best prospect out of Brazil since Neymar. And let me tell you, he's really good. Ooh. You can see it in little glimpses. Sometimes you see a player and you can watch like a full game or just a little clip of him. But with this guy, you can tell he's got it straight away. It's that rare thing, I think. But he's very young, so that's maybe a bit too much pressure to put on him.
Well, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens with Chelsea over the next couple of seasons, and we'll keep JJ and his business hat around to keep you updated at all possible opportunities. Now, John, Leny Yoro has moved to Manchester United, similarly young, also 18, for a big fee. It sounds like it's going to be around £52 million, the initial agreement. Before we dive in to talk about this, though, let's hear from David Ornstein himself with more specifics on the deal.
So Leny Yoro, he was always going to be one of the biggest talking points coming into this transfer window. There was a period where I was hearing that he may wait until January, sign a pre-contract agreement to go for nothing in the summer of 2025. But I think he came around to the idea of a move this summer. And so the interest started to build. It was always thought that Real Madrid were going to be the destination for him because that was his initial preference. But it wasn't clear if Real Madrid would want to go for him. There was also massive interest from the likes of Liverpool, from Manchester United, from Paris Saint-Germain. And I reported a few months ago that Man United and Liverpool were actively pursuing this situation despite the inevitable feeling that he would eventually end up at Real Madrid. But as the weeks have passed, Real Madrid just haven't come to the point where they need to be to do a deal with Lille. And that's exactly what Manchester United have done. They agreed a fee with Lille last week in the region of sort of 62 million euros. It can rise to a maximum of 70 million euros. Real Madrid weren't going anywhere near to that. And Liverpool backed off altogether because they believed he was going to Real Madrid. They were told he was going to Real Madrid. And therefore, they thought there's no point wasting our time. So it's very interesting to see how they feel about how it has turned out. Because after the clubs agreed a fee, Manchester United and Lille, it was then all up to the player. And eventually it came to the point where a plan was hatched for him to fly over to the UK. That was meant to happen on Tuesday night. In the end, it happened on Wednesday morning. And the idea was that he would undergo a medical in Manchester, finalise personal terms, having veered towards joining Manchester United at long last. It was then all about signing the contract, which is a deal that spans 5 years with an option to extend by 12 months. And Manchester United will feel they've got a massive coup here, even though they've paid a vast amount of money above what others were prepared to pay for this player. It's the top target for their defence, and that's the key area of focus. Having signed Joshua Zirkzee as their first summer recruit, they wanted to bolster at centre-back. But Yoro really was a key target for them, especially because Real Madrid were in for him. And that meant it a bit of a battle. And them coming out with him is symbolic, especially for the new regime at Old Trafford. So Leny Yoro's coming into Manchester United. Their fans are absolutely delighted. So is everybody inside the club, and we'll see how he gets on.
Thank you, David. John, I think we talked about him a little bit on this show before, but just briefly, why is it that Manchester United want him, do you think?
Well, we've just spent a long time talking about Chelsea trying to increase their asset profile with all the young players that they're bringing in who are exciting young prospects. Leny Yoro is probably the most exciting centre-back prospect in the world right now. Manchester United want to invest in him, and I think arguably because they want to improve their product rather than increase the asset value of their portfolio. But Leny Yoro is just a super exciting prospect. Physical profile is incredible, really, really athletic, really, really quick, and is just 18 and yet has a number of seasons of senior football under his belt. So played pretty much a full season for Lille last year, had about 1,000 minutes the season before that, and was even playing at the age of goodness knows what, 16 I suppose, the season before that. So this is a guy who's accelerated development, and you may remember we talked about Archie Gray on this show not long ago. Same kind of idea there. If you can bring in a player like this early, project that they're going to develop into one of the best players in that position in the world, then you're saving yourself a lot of money. But I do think that that it does sort of raise questions about the development, particularly in the centre-back area, because I think we see mainly the young exciting prospects who come through tend to be attacking players, because you can kind of get away with making mistakes in more advanced areas on the pitch. Very, very rare to see a player as young as 18 playing in a centre-back position and doing it so well. So yeah, really exciting transfer for Manchester United, and really suggests that the new ownership are doing smart moves in the business window.
I was going to ask about that, because whenever a transfer is north of £50 million, as this one is reported to be, fans understandably get excited. They have certain expectations. It is worth saying Leny Yoro is 18. Whilst he has a terrific physical profile, as you've said, and he's got a huge amount of potential. Just set some expectations for fans now who will be anticipating something in the first game of the season. A, do you think he'll be starting? And B, do you think, how much further does he have to go to be the player they might imagine he is now?
I think the thing to realise with a player like Yoro is that he uses his physicality and athleticism to get himself out of scrapes at times. So because he is so agile, so mobile, he can do things that you would probably teach defenders not to do, because the odds are that you're going to come out the wrong side of the fine margins on that one. But he can do that because he has the ability to get away with it.
Like how ugly people learn how to be funny, because they have to be.
Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. But essentially what we're seeing, I think, is a player who has a really incredible upside in terms of you can see the potential that he has, but he has a lot of learning to do in terms of even just getting minutes on the field. So Manchester United have been linked with Jared Branthwaite. He's 3 years older than Yoro. He's had loan spells in the Eredivisie. He's played full seasons in the Premier League. He's just got a huge back catalogue of experience to actually be able to buy from, so that he can make decisions better. He knows, even things as simple as, one of the things I noticed with Yoro is that sometimes he struggles to read the flight of balls from certain areas. And again, that's because he's been largely playing before this in youth football, which, everything changes. The speeds change, the ability of the players to kick the ball in certain ways changes. So he's got a huge amount of learning to do. So he's a fantastic player. He's great in and out of possession, but he's just very, very raw in many respects. So out of possession, that sometimes manifests itself as making mistakes that might look poor, but also in possession he's quite conservative at times on the ball, has a brilliant ability to turn opponents when he's under pressure, but then he will play more conservative passes than he might do if he's a bit more comfortable in certain scenarios. So I've just got a few screenshots to show examples of what I'm talking about in terms of this lack of maturity. This is all from the same game. This is the last game that Lille played last season against Nice. And the reason I show this is because it's very easy to cherry pick screenshots of players messing up in defensive scenarios.
Which one's he?
So he's the one with the arrow over his head. To start off this one.
Oh, in the background.
Yes. So this is early on in the game. I want to show you just an example of maybe a lack of maturity in terms of like spatial positioning here. So this is Jeremy Boga for Nice. He's being marked by the fullback here, and Leny Yoro here. He's the centre back. He's come across and tracked a player into the wide area. So he's the guy behind here. So he's moved out into the wide area, but immediately recognises there's no point marking this attacker anymore because Boga has the ball. If he goes around the fullback, then there's space that he can attack. So he does the smart thing to do here, which is to just support his fullback, stand in the space where it's most likely that Boga will end up doing. So this all looks very, very nice. But for some unbeknown reason, he just relocates himself, no doubt seeing that there's a big space between the other centre-back and the full-back here, moves out of the way, and Boga just goes round and into that space. And as a result of him moving backwards, his momentum just shifts the wrong way. Boga actually ends up in a situation here where he's attacking area where he's now more likely to hit that space ahead of Yoro because of the way the momentum's shifted. And what ends up happening is that Boga actually gets into the box and has two options. He can see both sides of the goal, so he can shoot near post or far post, but he can also play the ball into that corridor along the 6-yard box. All because Yoro, who you can see here, just shifted his body momentarily in a way that meant that option was open.
And this is an experience thing, isn't it?
Yeah, this is definitely an experience thing. This is decision making. He recognises the danger, but then seems to be caught in two minds about where the danger exists, and actually moves into the more dangerous scenario, I suppose, or defends the less dangerous option, and this kind of thing opens. Okay. Another thing that he does is that he gets very close to players, I think, particularly when he's when they're playing back to goal, gets really tight, and I think he sometimes can get rolled a little bit, in part because his physicality allows him to get out of scrapes. So he has this weird combination of getting too tight to players to allow them to roll, but also not getting tight enough at times because he's happy to let them turn because he knows he has the physical pace to catch them up. So I've got two examples of that. This is in the same game as well. So here we've got the attacker. He stepped up on him. The attacker actually ends up turning him quite easily and then has what we call separation. So just the ability to get beyond your defender to give you the options. We saw it in the last clip of Boga having the option of being able to shoot either side or play the cross. That's why you want to get separation as an attacker, and the defenders at the highest level are very good at not allowing that kind of thing to happen. The play carries on going from here, so he's turned really easily. He's now out of position and has to run back with momentum, which means that later on in this clip, this is about 5 seconds later, the ball is played back to the player that he is tracking, who turned him originally, and because the player has got separation, he's ahead of him, Yoro now needs to have momentum to try and catch him up, and here he's going to try and stop the shot coming in, so jumps in front of the ball. The player actually turns back inside, and so Yoro slides past, and the player now has a really dangerous moment here. That all comes from that initial inability to actually defend the first moment well, and then having to play catch up.
No one should ever ask John to do their best man speech, should they? I'm thinking, this guy's fantastic, one of the best young players ever. Here's 3 things he's done badly. Yeah.
Here's the third. Again, this is a back to goal scenario, right? He's receiving the attacker is receiving the ball back to goal, and Yoro doesn't get tight enough, so the player is able to turn. And we've got separation again here that we're talking about. So near post, far post, both of those options are on. And actually, when the shot eventually comes in, I don't think Yoro does enough to try and even block that. So, and no doubt because of the previous situation where he jumped in and went too far, he's maybe holding back a little bit on here. Yes, you're right. This does sound very critical, but I think the point is that he's still got a lot of learning to do about how to negotiate these kind of scenarios. These are all in the same game. This is 3 scenarios in the same game, 50 minutes of the same game. If he's sort of thrown in at the deep end at Manchester United, makes some of these kind of errors early on, you are going to end up with a very prized asset who will become one of the best centre-back options in the world. But I think that the fans will start criticising. And exactly.
Is it worth saying as well? He's only 18 years old. He said he easily gets rolled. He's probably going to tack on mass, isn't he? That's what they say. Tack on mass in the next.
That's what he needs to do. Is get bigger.
He's going to get bigger. Right? One last thing to say on Leny Yoro. I was listening to the excellent Devils in the Details podcast, a Manchester United podcast recently, and they were saying that of the 3 options that they've been looking at recently, have been rumoured to be connected to Branthwaite, De Ligt, and Yoro. Today, Yoro might be the worst of those 3 in terms of a performer. Obviously, in the future, he could be the best of them. But I assume on that basis, you wouldn't ideally be bringing him in to start. If you were in charge of Manchester United, would you also be buying another centre-back to maybe play instead?
I think so, yeah. I think if you brought in Matthijs de Ligt, then you have the option of starting de Ligt and developing Yoro. I think most clubs buying really elite prospects would want to send them out on loan probably for a season just to make sure they've got more minutes under their belt, particularly from a centre-back position. So, yeah, I think that if they bring in de Ligt and they have Yoro as a backup to him, that's a really nice window for them in terms of bolstering their centre-back.
Well, speaking of development, Amadou Onana has developed his own career by moving from Everton to Aston Villa, probably by the time this video is released, or maybe the whole thing's fallen apart. Now, JJ, what is it, do you think, £50 million is the reported figure, what is it, do you think, that made Villa spend that much money on a player like that?
Well, they need to replace Douglas Luiz because they had to sell him for PSR reasons on the 30th of June to Juventus. He's one of their best players. And there's an awful lot of good stuff for Aston Villa. It's very important for what Emery wants within his system. Now, Onana, we've seen at Everton, he can play as a 6 or an 8. He was the lone 6 for Belgium at the Euros. He's a very decent player, kind of an all-rounder. He is helped by being a massive boy, like he's a big lad, and that gives you certain benefits, especially in midfield, aerial battles, but also you can shield the ball better, you can... You're rangy.
People believe you.
People believe you. They listen to what you say, even though it might not be right. But
often isn't.
You have authority, and he's authority in that midfield. And he'll probably play as one of the 2 6s because oftentimes what Emery's team do are play with a box midfield. It changes to a 3 at the back and a 2 and a 4. There's loads of different things, but there's a box midfield. Now this role is really important because what they need to be able to do is get the ball through lines to the attacking midfielders who move wide and do all these different bits here. But this first pass is really important. Now, Emery's 6s also need to cover a lot of width, so when they turn over the ball they need to be able to cover the width, so they're doing a lot of defensive work, a lot of creative work, and just a lot of all-round midfield stuff is what you need, and Onana kind of fits that bill. He can do that. He's 22, so also he's still potentially going to get even better, but already he's a high-level international midfielder.
Yeah.
So I think what you'll see with him is that he'll be able to do a lot of the stuff that requires lots of game intelligence, being able to read the play, cover distances, but I think what he lacks is maybe this pass, this important pass, is the thing he can maybe see, but you regularly see him not execute it well. Especially in the Euros, you saw him trying to fire these through balls into players like De Bruyne, and they were just going straight out of play because he overhits them or he doesn't quite get it. Like he sees it, but doesn't maybe have the technical ability to play the final ball. He can switch the play really nicely. That's good. But in that note, in saying that he's maybe not got that in him, he's going to get better. But what you see here is that at the top of this list here is him next to Branthwaite and Gay as players who are very good at retaining possession. They don't give it away much. Now, obviously, this is probably system dependent, and Everton don't give the ball away much, and he's not one of the ones that's launching it all the time. But you'll get a player who do all the things that Villa need. And what they lose from Douglas Luiz going. He was very good, Douglas Luiz. Yeah.
Okay. What about? Give me a broader comment on Villa's transfer window so far, because it's been kind of an interesting one, hasn't it?
They brought in Ian Maatsen from Chelsea. He can play left back. That's probably what he'll do. They signed Samuel Illing Jr. from Juventus, probably a left back. Can play in midfield as well, though. He's got options. But it's basically lots of players who are multi-positional is what they want. Ross Barkley might be the starting midfielder with Onana in midfield now. Tielemans and McGinn might be the players that play further up. They have lots of players who can play in different positions around the 8s or the 6s now, so they're going to have a bit more squad depth, which is what they definitely need, considering they'll have quite a few more games in the Champions League.
Okay, well, fascinating. I mean, it's going to be interesting to watch Aston Villa in the Champions League this season. I look forward to it. Thank you, JJ. Now, John, moving on to Liam Delap. Liam Delap moving as a Manchester City young player, moving to Ipswich. I think the initial fee is £15 million. That could rise with add-ons later. Liam Delap joining Murray Hutchinson, who was on loan at Ipswich from Chelsea last season. That move has been made permanent now. It's a slightly bigger deal, I think. It's interesting. I mean, these are sorts of deals you would expect to see a promoted team making, because it's quite a lot of money, but they're not necessarily like big star players.
Yeah, I think we're talking about a really interesting context when it comes to promoted teams into the Premier League, because we've just gone from a season where all 3 promoted teams were relegated. I think maybe the reality now is that the teams that go up from the Championship into the Premier League are automatic relegation contenders, or at least favourites for that, for eventually going out. And I think Ipswich are a really interesting test case as well, because you remember last season Luton Town got promoted into the Premier League. And for many people, they were sort of accelerated in terms of their development. No one expected them to maybe hit the Premier League quite at this point. And so a lot of people were just touting them as the team that were just going to be flat bottom of the table and drop straight out. However, of the 3 teams promoted, they actually ended up being the team that looked the most likely to survive. And I think there's a few reasons for that. One of them is that Luton were able to come up and play a very similar play style to the way that they had played in the Championship. And the other thing is that Luton, built a team that I think, if they went down, would be stronger to come straight back up as well. And I think there's elements of both of those things here to what Ipswich are doing. So you've already mentioned Hutchinson and Delap. Delap will play as a striker. Probably he'll be the starting striker here. They brought some other players in as well. But what's interesting about their signings is, so Hutchinson played in the Championship last season. Delap is a Man City academy product who's been on loan in various places, mainly Championship. He was at Hull City last season. They brought him in, and then Jacob Greaves, left-sided centre-back.
No relation to Jimmy.
Potentially, I have no idea. Could be. But he was at Hull City as well. He's a Hull City Youth Academy product, one of the best, I would say, centre-back prospects in the league. So he's brought in as well. These are all players who've largely had experience in the Championship. Muric was actually playing for Burnley last season as a goalkeeper. He's been in the Manchester City system as well, so he's been in and around various different, he's been all over the place in many respects. And then Ben Johnson, who is a right back who's gone through the West Ham Academy. So they're focusing on Championship, players who've done well in the Championship, also players who've come through academies in the Premier League and maybe not made the step up. So very interesting approach. I guess that you could argue that what they're trying to do is build a team that is better than the one that they brought up, so that if they do go down, they will be in pole position to come straight back up.
So they're sticking to a strategy. So they had it. They're even though they're accelerated above that, they're still sticking to what the long-term plan is rather than jumping.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
which is what Luton did, to be fair, isn't it?
Yeah, Luton have done, and I think Luton will hope to do well next season in having dropped down back into the Championship. But the other thing to talk about is maybe play style as well, because what we see here is from Ipswich, they've got a fond manager, Kieran McKenna, who a lot of people know from his time at Manchester United, and he's sort of touted as one of these up-and-coming young coaches who's doing sort of modern football ideas, which usually means that you do something. Well, I mean, what he does is they play a 4-2-3-1. The left-sided forward comes inside, opens up space for Leif Davis, who's a bit more of a sort of wing-back profile than a full-back profile. Everyone shifts around, and then you've got your 3-2-5 in the advanced areas. Now, when people see this, they immediately think, well, this is going to be like high-possession football, patient build-up, etc. But
that's what I would think.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
But what this actually ends up looking like is quite different, because actually Ipswich are quite direct. So last season they had 53% possession on average in their games, which is only just slightly more than half.
Yeah, it's just over half.
It's just over half.
Yeah.
3% over. So what this means is that this is a team who actually are very good at playing sort of deeper football, moving quickly on the break and attacking from there. So there's an argument to be made that Ipswich's approach, compared to someone like Leicester or Southampton, who play much more possession-based football, could suit them to go into the Premier League next season and perform well, because they're playing very similar play style to what they're doing as well. So I think this is going to be fun. They've got a fun coach. This is a football that is going to, I think, port well into the Premier League, even though I still think that they will be favourites for relegation along with the other teams that get promoted. But they've also focused on the Championship, which I think a lot of Premier League teams just haven't really exploited as well as they can. So it'll be interesting to see how well that transfer focus on the Championship actually goes next season.
Well, very interesting. It's going to be good fun to watch Ipswich next season. Moving on, and speaking of sparkle dust, JJ, Nico Williams, star of the Euros, very exciting. Lots of teams interested, but purely speculatively and just for fun, I want to ask you guys who you think should buy Nico Williams. Where you think he should go. We'll start with you.
I've divided the possibilities into different teams, because where he should go might depend on who can actually take him, what's realistic. So I've got teams, if he wants to win stuff, so teams are going to afford him, because he's on big money at Athletic Bilbao. He's one of the most highly rated wingers now, not even young players in the entire world. Everyone wants him. He's amazing. So the only teams who can really afford him, he's got a release clause of about £50 million, I think, something like that. But big money wages as well. So he's not going to go to Ipswich, for example.
Sure.
So your team, obviously, Real Madrid, there's no room there, and they've got all the players already.
No room at the inn.
There's no room at the Real Madrid inn. Bayern Munich, Maybe they could do with someone fast in the sides. They've got Gnabry and Sané, but what are you going to do? Man City would be pretty good. They could afford him. They have Doku. Maybe they're just waiting their time to go in for it. And then PSG. But what's the point? And then you have teams below that are a nice place to live, but probably can't afford him.
This is a new category.
A new category, that's Barcelona.
Yeah.
Where he'd probably like to go and his pal Yamal is there.
Sure.
That's a good option. Then, of course, we have teams who can afford him. This is the interesting one to me. Teams who can afford him and give him the potential of winning. So, like Arsenal, who could do with that sort of player. He's the kind of game changer that would make things good for them, right?
We're nodding about that.
Yeah, I like it.
We like that.
Chelsea, they've already got all the players.
We're shaking our heads for that one, are we, John? No.
Liverpool have Diaz and Gakpo already.
They're too many players.
How about the last category of teams before we choose them? Why would you do this?
Oh, now we're talking.
Man United.
Yeah.
Aston Villa, Tottenham. It's not going to happen.
Tottenham.
I think Spurs is harsh to say this. I think he'd
be great there.
improve them.
I agree, but then he wouldn't win stuff. So if it's for him, like for Spurs, it would be amazing. But he would make them better. But would he win things? So if you're choosing where to go,
yeah. I mean, I guess the question for him is whether or not he thinks that he can make the difference at a team like that, and to a point where they actually start challenging, which I guess is a risk, right? So you probably want to go somewhere where they're already winning things. So you're talking your Man Cities and your Real Madrids. They're the two. Bayern Munich. Although last season notwithstanding, they're the teams to aim at. But yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested to see the Barcelona links as well, because obviously, as you've said, Lamine Yamal is playing at Barcelona, and there's the possibility that they could play very similar football to what they've been playing in the Spain national team together. So that might pique his interest. But yeah, I think for him, the best move is probably the most winningest move, as Americans say. So yeah,
I like the Arsenal one. That's the end anyway.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Amy Lawrence and Rafa Honigstein. With the latest transfer news and insights on every Premier League story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football, and you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.